Hey guys, it's Deconic, and I am super excited to present some new Race Spectre tech that I just discovered while planning my Pure Spectre League starter. And if nothing changes, then I am sure it is gonna change the way people approach Wraith Lord builds ahead of Necropolis. The idea was inspired by a video I saw from Captain Lance, I think, way back like towards the start of like season 3.23. where he mentioned that if you were to use a summon golem of hordes alongside like a regular summon golem, you could increase your golem cap by 1 and run an extra golem, or I mean at least something along those lines if I remember correctly. So that got me thinking about the Wraith Lord and how it specifies that you cannot use non-Spectre minions. Now if you take a look at my screen, you would see that I currently have a Race Spectre of Transience, or however it's pronounced, and Race Spectre, E and R respectively. Now, you would notice that, let's look for a Baronite creature because I don't want to replace them. You would see that if I were to cast Race Spectre, nothing happens, it just replaces because I have a maximum amount of 3. But if you were to look at of Transience, you would see it has a max of 5. So what happens if I cast it? I can get up to 2 extra Race Spectres. Now, I cannot actually get more than this because the Transience gem actually just increases the limit to 5. So if I were to cast it again, it's gonna replace one of my permanent specters, which of course we definitely do not want. So why is this important? Well, the biggest downside to Wraith Lord has always been a lack of utility minions, but with this tech you can have a second set of links with Transience and stuff like Feeding Frenzy, Calling Strike, and have these new temporary minions buff your permanent specters, increasing their power without reducing the specters you actually run. Because the previous way you would have gone about using Feeding Frenzy is either linking it to your main link, which obviously would reduce the amount of damage your minions would do in the long run, or you would have a separate link with a Race Spectre and then use one of your permanent minion slots for that one, and then that would apply your Feeding Frenzy and whatever. But with this way, you can have 9 permanent damage minions with all their links intact, and then have extra 2 temporary minions, which would then apply all these effects. Now, you could also pair this with increased duration because they have a base duration of 30 seconds. And then with increased duration max level, you should be able to get like 50 seconds or slightly more, so you do not have to like spam this often. And you could even take this one step further and plan out your temporary minions ahead of like boss fights if you're going uber bossing, and use things like Carnage Chieftains or Host Chieftains to get some charge generation going on. You could use Pale Seraphim for enemy debuffs. Same thing with Primal Crush Claw. The list just goes on for things you could potentially use your temporary minions for. But that's not all, because in patch 3.24, we're seeing a buff to Race Spectre of Transience, increasing its max Spectre count from 5 as I have it here, so I think about 7. They added 2 minions late game. It could even be 8. But what that means is we can now have possibly extra 4 or 5 temporary Spectres that we can use for whatever we so choose. We're gonna have to wait until we get the data mine information before we are sure how many more temporary minions this would allow us to have. But I think a safe bet would be planning for around having 4 extra minions by level 25, Race Spectre of Transience and Race Spectre. But you could also take this another step forward and make a 7-link glove with socketed skills, have increased base crits, something like crit multi for socketed gems that you can get from like Shaper Influence on the gloves, and then you can just use that on your Race Spectre of Transience link, and then spawn whatever monster is in your map for supplemental damage, just increase the amount of total damage you can expect from your build overall. And if I were to use this approach, personally, I would use support gems that would buff both melee and range, so I wouldn't care what I raised so long as it was a mob, right? So stuff like Feeding Frenzy, minion damage, maybe increase critical strikes, or even damage if your critical strike chance is good. So you really really don't have to pay any attention to anything but the number of like temporary minions you have. I am curious what people will make out of this tech before launch, but I'm sure there's going to be some very spicy plans ahead. Are you as excited for Necropolis as I am? Because I honestly cannot wait for Friday. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss out on future videos like my League starter guide, which should come complete with like low budget setups as well as high budget setups for progression. And with that being said, thank you for watching.